All right, welcome back to another episode of the Butterfly Effect podcast. Today I'm joined by my new friend Sabrina. Welcome to the podcast. And today we're going to be talking about something that to me was super shocking. I think a lot of people will find it very interesting and shocking that you had this experience as well. So we're going to be getting into a little bit about race today and then talking a little bit about George Floyd and how that honestly historical infamous event shook a lot of things in our world. So get comfy cozy and get ready for a great conversation. Sabrina, can you just kind of tell us who you are, how we came in contact, and a little bit about your background and upbringing?
I'm Sabrina. I'm a professor at the U of M, or an instructor at the U of M, where I'm also a grad student getting my Ph.D. I do media stuff, social media mostly, kind of educational content, and all of it really rooted in social justice or social equity issues. And my upbringing, I grew up in a town called Oak Grove, Minnesota. It's near St. Francis, Minnesota, where we both went to high school, St. Francis High School. And I think I maybe knew of you in high school, but then just a few months ago, somebody said, hey, have you heard of this Liana girl? She went to our high school. She's making social media stuff. She seems like she's mixed too. Maybe you guys would have stuff in common. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna slide into the DMs and see if you want to hang out, So yeah, and here
I love that. I'm so glad that you did that because I'm not good at that. I'll see people, I'm like, oh, they look so cool. I wish I could be their friend, but I get too nervous to put myself out there. Fear of rejection. I'm working on it in therapy, but I really am happy that you did because I feel like that first time we just got coffee and I even cried during it.
Yeah, me too.
It was just I just was oh my gosh, you're just somebody, you have such a great energy, first of all, and you're somebody I felt comfortable opening up with about something that I've not opened up with a lot of people because I haven't felt comfortable. So it was this bond we had.
Yeah.
And I like to say it's the trauma bond of St. Francis.
Yeah, real. Yeah.
The only people that I'm really still friends with are people of color from St. Francis.
Yeah.
We're bonded because wow, what an experience that we survived.
Yeah.
You had it longer than I did. I was in and out of there really quick.
Yeah. You moved to Blaine or
I moved to Maple Grove. So still predominantly white, but there was a little bit more seasoning in the mix there. St. Francis was a very interesting situation. While I was there, I survived it, but definitely when we were talking, so many memories of things I suppressed started to come back.
Yeah.
So I was hoping you can kind of start with that. What was your experience in high school? Mm-hmm. This was before you found out what your actual race and identity was. So take me back to then and some of the things that you experienced.
So I just want to start by clarifying because I know there's some controversy around the whole idea of finding your family with Ancestry DNA and 23andMe. So we'll talk more about that later, but my dad was adopted. He's racially ambiguous. I'm racially ambiguous. And because he's adopted, we didn't know the answer to those questions, what are you? Where are you from? And you can see kind of generationally our experiences are less in severity based on our, he's more black than I am. And, he had more explicit encounters with racism and discrimination, where me and St. Francis, it was more microaggressions, what are you? Where are you from? Can I see a picture of your parents? I had a nickname, the Samoan girl, at one point, and I felt weird about it, but at the time, our answer to that, what are you, was we're Greek and Italian, because that's what we were told. So yeah, it was kind of just a guessing game of maybe you're Hawaiian, maybe you're this. And I also tanned a lot in high school because everybody did, right?
Yeah. Tanning booths too.
Tanning booths, yeah.
Back when those
the goggles.
Oh my god.
The bunny,
The bunny. Oh, the stickers. I was so jealous of the girls that had that because I was I don't really go tanning, but I wanted that sticker.
I went tanning, and I'm pretty brown without going tanning, but then of course my skin got
Zuzu.
Hi.
Oh, he's making an appearance.
You want to hear the story?
He's really sweet, but I can move him if he bothers you.
Okay. I'm allergic to cats, but my friends have cats.
So, we're not going to have the first ambulance called on this episode.
No, not like that. Just a little bit of sniffles.
Oh my gosh, you're cute.
But yeah, so I went tanning a lot in high school, so everybody did, but my tan looked different, obviously, because I'm melanated, I know now. So people would be how do you get so tan? And why does your tan look like that? And things like that. I'm I don't know. I'm
Italian,
Sicilian, Sicilian maybe. Yeah. But yeah, really just a lot of that stuff when I think back to high school. Like, not really people wanting to know, like, about you, but more like, why are you different, right? It wasn't like questions like, what do you like to do, or what does your family like to do? It was, why does your family look like this? But at the time, I didn't know anything except for it made me feel weird and like uncomfortable, and I just wanted to get through it as quickly as I could and change the subject or move on.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking back, actually, like, so whenever we talk about like my family discovery stuff, my aunt said to me, kind of after we figured out I'm Black and not Italian, to look back on my life in times that I was in like predominantly white spaces, and think of all the times I probably found the only other brown kids in the room, right? And I look back and I'm like, okay, like the girls I know from high school that were Black or mixed, we were friends. And those were the times, looking back, that I felt the most like authentically me.
Wow.
And, you know?
To even have that back then.
Yeah. And I mean, then looking into like college, you know, still at that point, when I was studying abroad in Spain, still I didn't know that I was Black and not Italian. And, you know, my two closest friends in the program, aside from my roommate who I went abroad with, they were Black girls. Like, we just find each other because,
oh my gosh,
you know, we're a community.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, so that already is just like giving me goosebumps because it's just crazy. I really do think there's this like connection that we have amongst ourselves, and it's not because we want to exclude anyone, it's because it's safe to us. Yeah. And it's like this natural thing that we experience, which is really interesting that you've experienced that before you even knew. Yeah. How did you feel when people would categorize your race as like Samoan? Like, I know like that's not even what you would claim either. Right. Did that make you feel any type of way? I mean, at the time, like, I honestly didn't even know what Samoa was. Like, I didn't know where it was, you know, what the people looked like. So I'm like, kind of like, what the hell does that mean? Like, and looking back, I now know more about the world and like where people and places are. I'm like, okay, that makes sense because I'm tan and like bigger, but I don't know, I just felt like kind of like the clown, or like the, oh my gosh, like the scapegoat spectacle. Yeah. You know, like you walk into a space and it's like eyes are on you, but it's not because of who you are in here, it's who you are out here. And I think that's mostly what I felt, was just when I heard those things, like, number one, I didn't really understand. And number two, I just wanted it to, like, pass and go away as quickly. But it stuck, you know, that was a nickname for a couple of years. And the kid who made up the nickname has since reached out and been like, what the heck? Like, I'm so sorry. I would punch myself in the face now if I could. Wow.
Like, yeah.
Did he see something that, like, you posted about it, how it affected you, and he reached out? Or did he just come to that like terms on his own? I'm
not sure. I think he maybe saw me posting stuff about like my identity journey, and he was one of like the most curious people at the time. So I'm sure he was like, you know, seeing this stuff like that makes sense or whatever. But no, I'm not really sure why. I think he also kind of had an experience of like not fully coming into his identity in St. Francis, and now is like blossoming in a space where he's welcomed and accepted. Good. And maybe kind of realizing like, ooh, like I did to somebody what other people did to me.
Absolutely. And I also, like, as I'm sure more stories will come up from being around people who are ignorant and not aware of certain things. I'm not bashing anyone from my experience. I know we all hopefully grow in life. And I know, like, this experience when I was in St. Francis, we were very young, and unfortunately you're a product of your environment and the people around you. So if your parents who raised you think a certain type of way and you've only been around certain type of people, I can understand why some of this stuff has happened. I'm not minimizing it because it was very damaging to my like self-esteem. However, I want to leave space to say that I understand people, like, you only know what you know. And I'm just hopeful that people, if, you know, that went to St. Francis are seeing this, like, understand and have grown since then, or use this as an opportunity to grow further, and understand the experiences that people like us went through by going to that school or being in those spaces. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you came to terms that your dad found out his true identity, your racial identity, how that happened?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, my dad was adopted, and he was adopted into an all-white family in southern Minnesota. It's a town called Fairmont, very rural, very white.
Yes.
So, you know, he's told me stories of like being adopted, and the things that were said about him from the moment he was brought into the family were like very othering and very acknowledging that he's something other than white. So I think my dad met his biological mom when he was in his 20s. I think I was maybe 5. And so she came out here to St. Paul to visit. She lives in New York. The visit didn't really go well. It was kind of awkward, and my dad didn't get a lot of questions answered. He did ask, I'm obviously, brown, what's my dad? My grandma's also, a white woman, so, looking at her, you're like, okay, this color didn't probably come from you. Mm-hmm. So he's like, tell me about my dad, and she's like, well, I was, promiscuous around the time that you were conceived, and it's either a black guy or an Italian guy, or, a few of each, that could be your dad. And my dad was like, okay, so, it's true, I'm either black or Italian, right? So they go their separate ways, and my dad just kind of lost touch because he didn't like how the visit went. He didn't really feel like he got much from that relationship, whatever. So I think I was 5, like I said. So flash forward 20 years, I'm 25. It's January of 2020. And my dad was like, hey, I really kind of want to know, I'm sick of people asking me, and I'm in my 50s now, and I just want to be able to answer that question. He's like, so I'm going to take a DNA test and figure, is it Italian or black? At least then we'll know something. So he took a DNA test with Ancestry, and then he texted me one day, and he's like, are you sitting down? I'm like, okay, no, what? And he's like, just kidding, but, I got some news for you, we're not Italian. And so he sends, the screenshots of what Ancestry says, and it's very, sliding scale what they give you on Ancestry. Number one, because, it's not a certain process that they use or whatever. I'm not sure how, determinate it is, if that makes sense. But I think the main source of ambiguity is that there's not a lot of, there's not, a full set of documents for them to draw from if you look back on history, right? And, the whitewashing of history and the keeping of histories and stories within black communities and stuff. So, yeah, a lot of it's, here's a ballpark, but we can't give you an address and a name and stuff like that. So it said you're between 30 and 50% African American, and your lineage traces back to communities in Virginia on tobacco plantations, formerly enslaved communities in Virginia, which then traces back to what's today the Nigeria part of Africa, West Africa,
okay.
Southern Bantu. Mm-hmm. So our people go back all the way to West Africa.
Wow.
We know they were enslaved in Virginia, and somewhere along the line started coming up here to the north where we are in Minnesota. So it lines up, very well with black history and migration to the north and everything.
Wow. So
then it started popping up with some matches, cousins in the South. And then we found a half-sister my dad had here in Minnesota. So I started chatting with her, and then I really wanted to figure out who my grandpa was. So I went on this discovery, basically starting when we went into lockdown for the COVID pandemic, and then for a year plus after that, looking for my grandpa. I was getting white pages subscriptions and background people search tools and things like that. And plus I had so much time on my hands.
You're really
so
detective on, yeah.
So I'm I'm gonna find this guy. I need to know who he is. My dad needs to know who he is, and then maybe we can kind of just heal some stuff with this information. So buckle up.
I'm ready.
I think I was talking to my grandma more and trying to get some information out of her, but she's obviously pretty secretive about the whole thing. Obviously,
the one in New York or the adoptive? Okay.
So my dad's adoptive family, the parents are both dead, or they've passed away.
Okay.
So when I talk about my grandparents now, I'm talking about his bio parents.
Got it. Okay.
So she's in New York. Yep. So I'm just kind of messaging with her. I think I found her on LinkedIn when I finally, because my dad had lost touch with her. I got in contact with her. He took the test. He's like, here's the info, whatever, and then matches started popping up, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna talk to grandma and see she'll give me bits of information. But first I had to find her because my dad had lost touch with her in those 20 years. Mm-hmm. So I found her on LinkedIn after looking on Facebook, Google, whatever, and I just sent her a message shot in the dark, I think you're my grandma, here's the scoop, we're not Italian, we're black, and I want some names,
Yeah, give me a list, lady.
And so she's like, well, I think that the guy's name, suddenly she remembers one name.
Oh, convenient. Flashbacks, huh?
Yeah, okay, Grandma. So she's like, yeah, I think his name was like David Bradley. He was in this band with his brother named Carl. Like, that's all I know. That's all I have for you. I'm like, okay, so I'm looking for maybe somebody named Carl or David Bradley. So I just start looking up names on those like white pages sites and stuff, finding people here in Minneapolis, because she said it was a band in Minneapolis.
Oh. Why did she start with that?
Yeah, well, she just said it was like a band in Minneapolis that
because she moved from Minneapolis to New York?
Yeah, so she's based in like the Twin Cities, has my dad, moves out to New York.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, like, let me know. I feel like I need, like, a timeline.
No, that was just my brain. Like, how wouldn't you start with the bands?
Yeah, so she tells me, like, you know, it was a guy in a band in the cities. These are the names. This is all I have. And I'm like, okay. So I'm looking for, like, Carl Bradley on white pages, and I find, you know, like, a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old, and I'm trying to, like, add up the timelines, and I find this, like, 70-something-year-old guy in Minneapolis. I'm like, okay, I'll call him and see, just like cold calling, like, are you my grandpa?
Oh my gosh.
So I seriously feel like that Dr. Seuss book at this point. We're like, are you my grandpa? Are you? So yeah, I call this number up. I'm like, hey, you know, I'm looking for my grandpa. I hear you were in a band with him. His name is David Bradley, and like, I guess he was your brother. Do you have a brother named David? And he's like, I'm sorry, honey, like, I don't have any brothers named David. My only brother is whatever, like George or something. We hang up, and I'm like, great. That was like my one clue or whatever to keep this search going, and it's a dead end. So I just kind of sit there for a second. A few minutes go by, and my phone rings, and it's Carl. So I answer, and I'm like, you know, like, hey, you know, and he's like, I realized, like, you're not looking for Dave Bradley, you're looking for David Brady. Dave Brady was the lead singer of the band I was in the 60s. He wasn't my brother, but, like, you know how, like, black guys say bro, like,
yeah.
I'm guessing maybe my grandma heard them say, like, this is my brother.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
And so I'm like, okay, so David Brady, like, that's my grandpa, I think, maybe, right? So I start looking him up. I figure out he's the lead singer of this band they were in. So I talk to Carl more, and I get some more information about what he was like. Carl tells me this kind of sad story that my grandpa ultimately, or we'll call him Dave at this point, Dave ultimately, like, ended up into, he called it counterculture. So, like, you know, in the music industry, like, you can kind of go the wrong way, and he got into more, like, psychedelics and stuff like that. So he tells me that in the early 2000s, some radio stations in the Twin Cities and some media outlets were looking for Dave Brady, the lead singer of that band, because they were trying to get all the guys back together for this, like, Hall of Fame induction ceremony. I think it might have been, like, KDWB and some local media entities. They were looking for Dave, and they just couldn't find him. So Carl's like, the last time we heard of him, you know, it was like maybe the 80s, and then he kind of just fell off the face of the earth, really. Like, he wasn't the same. And that's kind of the story I got from everybody. Like, I started calling all these other people I figured were in the band with him, and they all just gave me, like, tidbits of information about what he was like.
Were they helpful? Like, did they want to share about it, or how were they?
They were, like, a little bit, a little skeptical at first, but then the more I explained, the more they shared. And also, it was so long ago that some of them didn't have, like, all the memories, or, like, it would come back to them later.
Yeah.
So it kind of seemed like I had, like, half of a story about a person. And so, yeah, I just kept looking, and I ended up finding a lot of, like, archived newspapers, clips, you know, about him and his band. And so then I just started searching on Facebook Dave Brady and the Stars, because I figured, like, well, I posted on Facebook about finding my grandpa was in this band, like, what if somebody else did? So then up pops this Facebook post that says, like, my dad, Dave Brady, or the lead singer of Dave Brady and the Stars, like, gave me my love of music, da-da-da. And I'm like, wait, so this lady is posting that Dave is her dad that means she's my aunt? That means... So I'm like, I think I just found another sibling of my dad.
Oh my gosh.
But you know, like on Facebook, if you message somebody you're not friends with, it goes to that like...
request.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, if I send her a request, she's never going to see it. So I'm like, I'm a comment on this post and say like,
yes.
Hey, I think you're my aunt, check your DMs. Like, I gotta be bold.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, I was thinking, you know, at least it's not like, hey girl, you want to buy some skincare?
My new hair product. No shade.
So yeah, I wrote that on the comments, and like right away she read my message, and I like told her like, hey, you know, I think you're my dad's sister. I gave her like some of the story I just told you, and she was just like, hey, wow, like, yeah, let's talk.
Oh my gosh.
So we started talking, and then of course we wanted to confirm with DNA. So she had previously done a 23andMe test. And like I said, my dad did Ancestry. So those are two separate databases that would have never like interfaced.
Oh, yeah.
So she went ahead and did an Ancestry one, and right away matched your sibling. They're half siblings. And then she also matched with the other sister my dad previously matched with. So all three of them are half siblings. So yeah, we all started talking, and this aunt, her name's Mecca. Seriously, like, I can't even explain to you like all the connections we have and like this relationship we've built ever since. And so we've kind of just been like growing this family ever since then. Ever since the hey, are you my aunt?
I keep getting goosebumps this episode. That's just so awesome. Oh my, and so that's the aunt that you've been really close with since
Yep,
then.
the other one's in Duluth, and
okay.
we like kind of have talked, but she's got like a complicated life, and we just haven't really been able to connect as much.
Yeah, hopefully maybe someday.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah.
How is your dad feeling with all of this during this time?
Yeah. At first, you know, he didn't seem like super interested, kind of just like, okay, cool, like, wow, I have a sister. It's almost like he needed time to process it, and the more his brain, like, I don't know, buffered or something, like, the more things set in, and, like, the deeper he reflected on experiences, and it gave him a new lens to look at his life with. So going back to his adoption, he told me that in his teens, he learned that when he was brought home, the grandma in the family asked, why did you bring home a little N-word baby? And the parents were quick to explain, well, no, here in his information, in his papers, because they give you a paper that's like, here's your new son. His biological father is, and it said, of Swedish and German background. It said nothing about his dad being a black man in a band. It said he was like he worked at like a printing shop or something, and he enjoyed music. It didn't say anything about the legacy he was, you know.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so then, you know, so my dad's like telling me these stories from when he was a kid of like, you know, he got beat up at the bus stop, kids calling him the N-word, or he even said that when he was like a little kid, his adoptive mom, would scrub his knees in the kitchen sink in the summertime with like Ajax, like a cleaning solution, because she thought his knees were dirty. She doesn't know that a little black boy is going to get real dark in the summer, or like a mixed boy, you know? So his knees weren't dirty, they were just black.
With Ajax?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So, like, in the most literal sense, my dad was whitewashed, like, by the family that took him in.
Literally.
Yeah. And I think that's the best, like, analogy I can give you is, like, that's what happened to him growing up, you know? Like, his papers weren't true. His... you know, when people asked why he was tan, the answer was he's Greek and Italian. So,
oh my god,
what do you think happens to a kid who grows up like searching for something that they never get to find the answer to, like who they are, why their experience is this way? So his whole, you know, 50 plus years, he's looking back over like, holy shit, this is because I was black. This is because I was black.
You have to unpack everything again.
Yeah, and like for me, looking back, you know, I only have 25 years, and I can look back at you know, going back to St. Francis, one time a kid, I kind of liked this senior boy, you know, I was like maybe a junior at the time. Again, real tan, like in the winter months in Minnesota. So come into this kid's house, and he's like, hey, this is Sabrina, to his parents. Hey, mom and dad, this is Sabrina. Don't worry, she's not black. That's how they introduced him.
Don't worry, she's not black.
Yeah, and like I can put myself back in that entryway, standing at the bottom of their stairs. They're on the stairs. We're talking to them. And I just felt myself, like, shrink. Like, do I explain that I'm Italian? What do I, and I felt some type of way in that moment. And now looking back, I'm able to identify what I was feeling, why I was feeling that. And, again, that's 25 years. My dad had 50 years to look back on. So just a lot of, like, reanalyzing our experiences and our upbringings with, like, the full picture in mind. And yeah, a lot of stuff like that comes out, and it's really messed up.
I can't, like, I'm just putting myself in that position because it was already enough to unpack being biracial, but I knew I was biracial. Yeah. I knew what the two races were that I was growing up. Yeah. And it was still a lot to unpack with knowing that information. Yeah. Now I'm trying to put myself in a position like you or your father, and not, like, thinking one thing and then unpacking it and having to relearn and having to do it all during a time where there's so much shit going on around us. Yeah. Like, there's always shit going on, but I feel like you found this out in 2020 at the beginning of, like, this huge civil rights movement continuation that we're going through right now. Like, oh my gosh. And so I forget, sorry, did your dad live with you in Oak Grove? Like, were your parents...
No. So I should explain this part because I think it's kind of important to, like, why this was so big for our family. So my mom and dad were married until I was, like, 2nd or 3rd grade. They separated, and then my dad moved down to St. Paul on Maryland Avenue, if you know where that is.
I think so. Yeah.
It's, like, right off the highway, yeah. So, I did the whole every other weekend and Wednesdays with my dad. And then I think, like, 5th grade, my mom started dating my stepdad. So then my mom was living at this point in Wyoming, Minnesota, which is near Forest Lake. Okay. And my stepdad was living in Oak Grove. And so my mom sold her house in Wyoming. We moved to Oak Grove with my stepdad. And then my dad we're still going to my dad's house for a while, but then in 6th grade, because I was already at St. Francis at this point, my dad was arrested. And so he was in jail for several years of my time in St. Francis. Wow. And then so now, like, in this stage of my life, my dad is my stepdad.
Got you.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely understand.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that piece. And, like, so then your siblings, all the siblings you have are with your stepdad?
So my stepdad had 2 daughters from his previous marriage. Okay. And then my dad has, like, a bunch of, me and my brother, we have the same mom and dad.
Oh, your brother. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then my dad has 2 other kids from after that.
Is your brother as racially ambiguous as well, or?
Kind of. He's lighter. Like, he's pretty white looking in his skin tone, but, like, his facial features are really black. Okay. And his hair is very textured. Like, people, my aunt that I found said if she looks at me and my brother, she can see him, like, that's a black man right away, and me, it's more like, oh, maybe she's Latina, or...
Oh, wow. Yeah. How was your brother's experience in St. Francis?
He hasn't talked a lot about, like, how the racial component came into play, because he has a disability, and that was another thing. Like, he had a very bad experience there, being, neurodivergent and disabled. So he ended up going to a different school in high school because he was bullied so much there.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, very lack of understandings there.
Oh, yeah, on many levels. Mm-hmm. I'm glad that he had a better experience somewhere else.
Me too.
That makes me really happy. Can you talk about how you navigated your newfound identity? Like, so after you came to this information, like, I'm sure, like, walk us through, like, the first moments and, like, how it blossomed from there.
Like I said, this was, like, months before everything happened with George Floyd's murder, and the protests and all that. And, like, at the time, I guess kind of like my dad, I was kind of like, okay, like, that kind of makes sense, looking back. And it took a while for things to start kind of spinning in my head and clicking. And I honestly attribute that to everything that came out of the aftermath of George Floyd's murder because, I grew up in predominantly white spaces, so my understanding of racial issues was the same as theirs, And so just being, I guess, like, forced to learn everything, because everybody, wanted to read and learn and do better, and I was right there along with everybody, and then realizing, I learned in a training at school, because, of course, like, everybody did diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings and discussions, and so in a training I was doing for my job at the university, there was like a role play situation, and it was like, you know, Susie Q is multiracial, and like in the lunchroom people always ask her about like or people more frequently ask her about like her racial and ethnic background, like identify what this situation is, and a microaggression was one of them. And I was like, wait a minute, like when people ask what you are, like that actually is something.
Wow.
So yeah, things like that, like as I'm learning about these things, because collectively, you know, we're trying to be better, I'm realizing, crap, I experienced a lot of this, and I couldn't even identify it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I remember at our conversation, just like, that's what brought it back. I was like, there's so many things I experienced at St. Francis that I didn't even realize was a microaggression, because all I wanted to do was fit in.
Yeah, all you wanted to do was fit in, yeah.
And I knew I could never perfectly fit in, because no matter what I did with my hair, no matter what clothes I wore, I was still brown, and I was still going to be darker than everyone else I went to school with. And I just wanted anything that I could do to change and make myself more accepting, white passing, whatever. I did. I remember hearing those comments, and that's like really made me emotional, like, oh, your hair would be so pretty if it was longer, or oh my goodness, like, you're so tan, but don't get any darker, like things like that. And I remember like keeping that in my head, like, oh, you should have a bigger butt because you're black, like just down to those type of things. People I dated they would be bullied for dating me and be like, oh, she has, and talk about the color of my genitals, like, you weirdo, like I mean, that's just high school stuff, but it's like it was a new level, because the key factor was they wanted to bring my race into it, and like the second somebody didn't like me, I was an N-word, but before then they were my best friend. It was just tons of yucky situations like that I was like, wow, I really went through that. I suppressed them for sure. Was there any struggles that you experienced embracing your black identity?
Yeah, you know, because of being mixed and being light-skinned, I was really unsure of how to navigate embracing my identity, and worried about taking up space that might not be mine. And I was afraid of how people would react. Like, nobody has the full story like I do, so, you know, it's hard to explain, like, reanalyzing your own situation and like learning your own situation a new way and stuff, like it's very nuanced, and people like just sometimes don't have the understanding to be able to receive it. So yeah, I was scared to take up space, and then I ultimately was like, no, this is my space that's been kept from me, and I'm gonna boldly occupy it.
I love that. Was there any challenges with your mom finding it? Because like, I feel it. I'm not sure how much involved in the process she was while you were like getting your Nancy Drew on. And
she was helping me a lot.
We love that. We love that.
I think I get my Nancy Drew from my mom.
Oh yes.
You know, I mean, she's white, obviously. Like a lot of my black friends joke, like I'm the mixed kid with the white mom, like, and it's a real thing. You know, you grow up with more proximity to whiteness and all that, and so I think it was hard for my mom at first to understand, like, why it was so, don't get me wrong, like, she was supportive and wanted me to find out this information, but then when I did, it was hard for her to get why it was so, like, it was like a revelation for me, you know, like a transformation of who I am and how I can fully become myself. And she was kind of just like, oh, I just thought we were finding some family, you know. But she gets that she doesn't get it, and she really tries to. But of course, you know, having a white mom and white aunts, like, there's microaggressions that come from them. And so I guess, like, the one thing is, like, I post jokes a lot on my TikTok, like, about, like, white people and white families saying things that they say, and, like, that hasn't gone over the best, but other than that, they try to learn, and that's all I can ask.
What do they feel offended by it?
Yeah, like, oh, this is about us, like, this makes your white side look bad and stuff like that, and it's like, it's not about you, and
the shoe fits.
You look that great, and also if it fits, like,
change it,
you know, lace that shit up and do better.
Get a new pair of shoes, because we didn't put that on your foot. No, I got you with that one. I remember, well, we'll get into it in a little bit, but yeah, I can definitely relate to that. So take me into where you were at in your journey when the infamous historical event of George Floyd being murdered close to home. And, like, I never in a million years thought it would happen somewhere in Minnesota, because for some reason Minnesota felt safe to me. Even though I did experience what I experienced, it just was never on that level. So I know I felt really shocked, but take me through where you were at and how that kind of unfolded.
I think at first, like, when the riots started happening, I kind of had the same, like, there was a lot of people, like, incorrectly quoting Martin Luther King, you know, when he talks about, like, peaceful protesting and keeping peace when we, you know, like, fight for racial justice, but we now know that those quotes were taken out of context, and I feel like at the beginning I kind of had that question of, like, why does it have to be violent, and why did there have to be destruction? And then the more I just sat with the pain that, you know, this has been happening, like, people have been dying at the hands of police, and this is the time that we are forced to watch it because we're all in lockdown. We're watching the news every day. I think this was when I realized, like, no, actually Martin Luther King said that riots are the language of the unheard, and that's why people were pissed, you know. They've been saying, you know, this isn't fair, this system isn't fair, and now people care about it a little bit. So, like, at first my reaction was that, you know, like, well, couldn't we have a conversation, whatever, and then the more I understood and researched and just, you know, like, learned about my own dad's experience in U.S. systems, being incarcerated and being kept in the system. Still today, he's in the system in New York, and seeing and understanding, like, this is what happened to George Floyd, and now also I'm learning all this information about disproportionate rates of incarceration and all this that we're not taught in St. Francis High School's history class. Like, look at these rates of white people versus black people in jail. Like, this is systemic racism. Hell no, we didn't learn that.
They just tell you the facts, so you make your own implications, and you think it's because, you're all those negative stereotypes that we hear all the time, and it reinforces it because they don't properly teach you how to read data and where this stems from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so being, like, you know, collectively forced to reckon with this racial injustice, and learning then, you know, all this stuff that followed, I realized my dad was another guy in this racist system, and I didn't even understand that. And so that was a big moment for me of, like, I was able to forgive my dad for being incarcerated because I realized it wasn't entirely his fault. Yeah, he did a bad thing, but he didn't kill anybody and nobody got hurt. Yet he's having the outcome, you know, a similar years of people who killed someone. And so I started to realize, wow, there was so much more at play than I knew and that I could even understand at the time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So then, okay, so George, can you tell me a little bit more? Because I can also share about this.
Yeah.
When George Floyd was murdered, and, like, I feel like people were rightfully upset, as we said. People were drawing lines in the sand.
Yeah.
For me, I was very cold and dry. I was done with it. I was like, I've experienced so much of this shit in my life, and I don't even have it out of the worst. I have a lot of privilege, and I've been able to blend in a lot of white spaces, but I've seen it and I've felt it, and I know there's a lot of shit going on. And when George Floyd was murdered and people were in support of it, I knew where I felt safe. And then the people who were in support of police and Blue Lives Matter, I remember thinking, you are so off the ball here. I have no interest in teaching you. I have no interest in keeping you in my life. And I cut a lot of people out. And I don't regret it at all, personally. I do hope that people have grown and learned since then. But, like, I am happy, and I made that line very cut and dry. How did you do, or how was that for you?
I had the same, like I said, it took me some time to learn and to get to the point of, I mean, I was down there, you know, protesting and helping cleaning up and all that, but it was some time until I was unpacking all of this on, like, a intellectual level too. And so at first, you know, I was, like, engaging in conversations with people on Facebook, I think from an uninformed perspective at that point. And the more informed I became, the more I got to that point of realizing how my life had been impacted by, you know, anti-blackness and white supremacy, and it's so insidious that I didn't even realize it was impacting my life. So once I got to that point of trying to share my story and you know, wanting to do something to kind of, like, I guess, like, be in my community for the first time in 25 years and, like, do something in this tragedy for my community. I felt like I could talk to the people that weren't understanding, and I tried to engage in conversation and educate them once I was more informed. Sometimes people started to get it, and sometimes I had to delete and block too, because there was a lot of just, small-mindedness and inability to expand your understanding and worldview. So I cut a lot of people off too. And then I also tried to, again, have patience with people who grew up in spaces like we did, realizing that they don't have that personal level to be able to understand these. We can look at big numbers of how many people are killed by police each year, how many black men versus white men are incarcerated and stuff like that. But unfortunately, when it's on a personal level, it hits you deeper and faster. So I've tried to have patience with people who don't get it, knowing that, with the privilege I have, being able to pass for white like 9 months out of the year sometimes, or like, depending on how long summer is, I feel like it's my place to talk to white people and get tired from talking to white people, because black women who aren't ambiguous have to be exhausted every day in their interactions in a way that I don't experience.
Wow. I like how you put that, because I was just going to give you kudos before you said that last piece of you doing the work and having the patience to teach people, because I think that's beautiful. And I think a lot of this could be resolved if people took the time to learn more, took the time to meet new people outside of their everyday circle. Like, the world is too small to live in the same town your whole life. Like, if that's what you want to do it, but go travel and at least get to explore and open your mind to more things. But I give you kudos for taking time to do that, because I'm sure a lot of people lives have been changed for that, and their perspectives have changed. I felt how I felt, like, kind of what you're saying. I felt exhausted. Yeah. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Yeah. This seems like common sense to me. Like, we've been doing this for years. This isn't new. You know, another man dying shouldn't be the straw that broke the camel's back on you realizing that this is wrong. Yeah. I just felt so exhausted. I'm like, if you don't get it yet, you don't get it. And so I was at that point where I cut it out. So I do give you kudos for that, and I think that's incredible that you kept doing it, because that's not easy work either, especially when people don't want to open their mind and learn. Yeah. What were some of the biggest misconceptions that you felt like you were fighting?
When I started sharing my own story of what happened in my family with incarceration and
Delaney. Okay. All right, we're back.
When I first started sharing my experience and my story and, like, the things I was learning kind of, like, in real time, some of my friends weren't understanding or willing to, like, accept this growth and transformation in me personally. And then I realized a lot of people have a small understanding of what blackness is, or a monolithic understanding of what blackness is, because I don't fit stereotypes that they have in their head of what is black. They were unwilling to receive me as, mixed race, black and white, right? I'm not either or, I'm both. And it was very hard for people to wrap their heads around the fact that melanin comes in all shades, and, black culture is different depending on the family and the space that you're in. So I just realized it was going to be hard sometimes to share my story with people who I thought were my friend, but actually only were friends with who they deemed acceptable. A version of you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I actually had a friend who, like, was asking a white friend who was asking her, like, one or two black friends about my experience, asking if it was okay that I was identifying as mixed or black. And then one of her friends came into my DMs asking all these questions about, like, when did you start identifying as black, and, like, accusing me of, like now that it's trendy to be black, like, you're flexing your blackness and things like that. And I quickly was able to trace the dots back to this was one of my friends. I could see they were following each other.
Oh, wow.
And so basically weaponizing a black person to speak this monolithic, stereotype of blackness to me to reinforce the idea that I shouldn't be. Yeah, it was disgusting. Yeah.
A friend too.
Mm-hmm.
How did you confront her?
I did. I think I went about it a little immaturely at the time. I was so angry.
I don't know if there's a way you could do that immature. That was pretty fucked up.
It was. I posted before I talked with my friend about it. I posted on my Instagram story about what was happening. I didn't say their name. Mm-hmm. I didn't. I don't think there was any identifying information or anything. But then quickly, she became the victim because I was cyberbullying by sharing the story, and I should have just came to her first, which I maybe should have. But yes. I felt it was worth saying that, this is how people are going to react when you embrace like a more nuanced identity. Some people can only see part of it, So that was rough, and we're still, I still feel a distance in that friendship. She's apologized since, and
that's good.
And yeah, and she's, learned more about multiracial identities and stuff, but, you can't really come back from that.
No, you can't. And did she know the whole journey that you went on?
No.
Okay. That doesn't give it a reason. I'm just curious. I was like, how can you still... And so she has to know now.
She knew about me finding my family, right? And finding my grandpa and my aunts, but she didn't know about my dad being incarcerated and, the generational trauma this was also exposing. So, as I shared that with her, she was like, I didn't know that was your experience, and I'm sorry, and, but, I shouldn't have had to give you my full story for you to then accept my identity, right?
Exactly. You don't have to give a resume to qualify for that. What? Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm sorry that happened to you.
Thank you.
And that's really shitty, especially coming from a friend.
Yeah.
That's really shitty and unfortunate. There was a lot of friends that, I felt didn't support me during that time, I would want them wanted them
during the summer of 2020.
Yeah, and didn't, and it wasn't just about sharing something on your Instagram story. That was the bare minimum you could do.
Yeah.
But I definitely noticed who didn't even do that.
Yeah.
And that stood out to me, I remember. And maybe that's silly because not everyone, that's their way of contributing and showing, but I feel like in today's age it is a way that you're at least showing you're in support of a cause. And I don't know, you notice some things like that.
I think actually I want to say more on that.
Please.
Because I think so before, let's say May of 2020, because that's when everything, May 25th was when everything went, before that, I was very heavily involved in a pyramid scheme, I'll call it what it is, with people from our hometown. Mm-hmm. And because of my background, my educational background, wanting to be a dermatologist and stuff, I was really, I felt called to sell this skincare stuff because it worked really well for me. But I quickly learned what a pyramid scheme is and these fake friendships and really toxic environments. And I have this very distinct memory of being down at this beautiful gathering. It was in the parking lot where the Target, Lake and I forget the intersection, but where everything was happening. There was this parking lot with a Target, and then a National Guard was posted up there, and it was intense, but there was this beautiful stage that somebody came up from the South and made. Everybody signed it and wrote messages to George Floyd. And it was the most multicultural gathering I've ever seen, all types of people, and people were praying together, and then they were worshiping and singing together, and but it wasn't it was about a certain God or a certain belief. It was just this is community, and we need to collectively heal and be together.
Oh.
And I have this memory of being there and just this encounter that I won't forget. And at the same time, I'm getting Facebook messages from this group with these girls in this pyramid scheme, it's month end, we gotta hit our goals, we gotta sell our products. And I'm are you fucking kidding me? You bitches care about selling products right now when somebody was just murdered in our streets by our police? I don't care if I meet month end right now, right?
Wait, open your eyes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And so, and I said something this is going on right now, I'm sorry, but I just don't really care right now about this.
Good.
And they were quick to, just all the things that you expect to hear from somebody who's so ignorant and privileged in that type of moment of, yeah, we get that this is happening, but also we can't stop living our lives. And, this girl was, posting on her Instagram story about how she was so close to getting a Mercedes with this pyramid scheme if she could reach, the month-end goals. like on May 27th, 2 days following George Floyd's murder.
A Mercedes. I'm so close to this car.
Yeah.
Wow, and I'm sure they didn't use their platforms to talk about anything else.
Didn't say a
Yuck!
thing. Yeah.
Yuck!
Yeah. So that sticks with me of, like, I thought you were somebody in my life who I could look up to, right? Like, you're my team leader, or the people who were the team leaders and didn't say anything. Like what you just said, it became apparent of, like, who cared and who didn't very, very, you know.
Because they didn't have to. It doesn't affect them.
Right.
For them, life does go on.
Yeah.
Life doesn't really get affected that much. For people like us, even though we weren't killed, our family member wasn't killed, it opens our eyes. We have to change the way we move in our comforts of our own state.
Yeah.
They'll never have to experience that. They don't have to.
Never.
Like, they don't have to look at a police officer and be like, am I next?
Right. And quite frankly, they don't even have to look at a black person and confront their implicit bias, because there's nobody around them.
They don't keep anybody in their circle that doesn't look like them.
Exactly.
I stay away from people like that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry you had to go through that.
Go Saints.
Yeah, go Fighting Saints. Oh my gosh. Ew. So after, like, you called them out on their, like, ignorance and not even acknowledging, like, this worldwide craziness that is happening in our backyard, what happened after that?
I stayed involved for a while.
You did? Okay.
Yeah, like, I tried to have conversations, and I also, like, one thing I realized about myself is I always assume that the other person, like, has the understanding, you know, of, like, these issues and, like, human rights issues, or that they care about it. So, like, I went into the interactions assuming still that they're on my level, and kept realizing I need to not have that assumption, because it's painful to realize, you know. So, you know, talking to them about how I want to use my platform to talk about issues of social and racial justice, and I couldn't see alignment anymore with the company or whatever. And I was expressing that, but they were saying, like, well, no, like, you can still use your platform. I've been seeing the things you've been doing, and, like, it does align with the company, whatever. So I kept listening, and I kept trying to push through it. And I think maybe almost a year went by. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think it was almost a year before I finally resigned from the business, because I had started, like, sharing some of my experiences online. I actually wrote an article about them for an academic publication about, like, exploiting, like, feminism or feminist, like, messages to sell the business and things like that. And, like, a year after my article was out, they finally caught wind of it, because they're not reading academic articles.
They're not reading. That's funny.
So yeah, then, like, the corporate office was like, we see that you've been, like, talking online about your, like, I think they said, like, slander. And so, like, if I don't take down those posts, then they'll terminate me. And I was like, I'm just terminate myself. I'm out.
Yeah. I'm actually gone, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Sugar. Ew. And then the girls afterward, not very nice.
No, I don't think we've talked really since.
In what ways, though? Like, shifting a little bit more now towards, like, post George Floyd, and, like, how you really started to get involved, because I would say, like, you're super involved in your community, or you're motivating me to want to get more involved. So, like, in which ways have you, like, broadened your horizon for the movement, and, like, what have you been doing since?
Well, first, like I said, I had to learn. Like, you know, I grew up whitewashed, and I needed to deepen my identity and my understanding of these issues. And the more I was able to understand kind of generational trauma in Black communities, and how, you know, our ancestors' traumas passed down, like, there's actually scientific proof of this, like, genetically DNA. Now.
Yeah.
And so I guess, like, with that, so I'll just say a little more about that. I was able to figure out that my grandpa actually has a mental illness, and my dad does too. I don't know that my grandpa's is diagnosed, but my dad and him, like, have very similar, like, the descriptions people gave of him were things like, you know, he got angry at the drop of a hat, or his mood would flip like a light switch, and things like that. And my dad has bipolar disorder. So I was able to connect some dots in that way. My brother has similar diagnosis. So, like, very generationally, you know, connecting what's being passed down on the male side specifically, and then also encounters with U.S. systems. That was also a generational thing among the men on that side. So the more that I figured out in my own family, the more I wanted just like our country and our world to be aware of these issues, because like I said before, even when it's happening to you, you can not know it because of how white supremacy functions. So I started just, getting involved as best as I could, like, first attending workshops and learning about like how to go about anti-racist education in my job as an instructor at the U of M. Like, I teach Spanish classes. We talk in the higher level classes about like media representation. So first, like, how can I help my students deconstruct these stereotypes, in the language classroom? So we'll talk about things like, think about like how you see indigenous culture in the U.S. represented. And often, it's like braids and beads and feathers and like tribal, like chanting and songs, and that's it. That's the representation. So we talk about things like that and how to like broaden your understanding of a community, because there's not just one type of an indigenous person or a black person. So first that in my teaching, and then starting to bring some of that to my social media, like talking about issues of, being mixed or, connecting with your family and things like that. And then also like figuring out how to support people who were already doing this work, like this shirt here.
Yeah, show it off!
It says, "Teaching Black History is not CRT." And this is by Alfred's Laundry. If you look him up on Instagram, he has super sick t-shirts. Like, stuff like that, just like buying shirts like this that I can wear on the daily. And from black people, keeping money in our communities rather than going to Amazon quick when I need something. Like, it's going to take more time, sure, to find like a small-owned, black-owned business, but let's build wealth from the inside,
the impact is greater.
Yeah. So stuff like that. I started doing, like, I knew I was good at marketing and media from my pyramid scheme, so I thought, like, how can I bring this work to, like, other spaces?
Yes.
So I started just getting involved with, like, different projects that have social justice or, like, equity missions. And so now I'm working with my new aunt that I found with Ancestry DNA. We've grown this amazing nonprofit, the BIPOC Foodways Alliance, that's all about storytelling through food and keeping stories in communities. Another one I'm involved with it's in Kansas. It's for Spanish speakers who don't have access to like good interpretations in the medical setting. So like it doesn't really matter what the context is. It's just like, is this project like doing something to make more equity? Yeah. So I've just been involved that way, and just like, on a simpler level, like following more Black creators and educators, so that my Instagram timeline wasn't just like all white people from my childhood.
Do you have some favorite ones that you'd like to share out?
I really like Glow Graphics. She's changed her content a little bit, but she's a creator, like a teacher. She posts stuff about like being a Black woman and like hair and things like that. Mixed in America is a really good one. They talk about like the duality of being mixed.
I'm following all of these.
Yeah.
So yeah.
There's a lot I could tell you. Angel Marie, she's a Black like business coach. And she's actually like just went full-time independent, like from her main hustle.
Yes, Angel.
She makes content about like faith-based content, stuff like that. So like it doesn't even have to be like, Black people aren't just going to talk about being Black.
Yeah.
But like
there's so much
finding somebody who is Black who does something I want to learn about too,
Yes, that part. I like that. And if you think of any more, just text me them. I can put them all in the description notes. What advice do you have for someone who either is going through something similar that you have been going through? Because unfortunately, I'm sure you're not alone with that.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for them, or someone who just wants to learn more, that is an ally and was unaware of their ignorance and like wants to be better?
For the first part of the question, for people who might be exploring like their identities, whether it's mixed with Blackness or with any, mixed in any way,
right?
Learning to explore your identity, knowing that people aren't always going to understand, and that they don't have to understand because it's your identity. And really, really connecting with people who look like you and people who sound like you and move through the world like you, because the more of you see around you, the more of you that you understand. So I think that representation really does matter.
It does.
And getting connected, like I think that the most powerful thing for me has been, like, last weekend I went to it was a weekend writing intensive for Black artists and writers in the Twin Cities area. And it was all, like, Black and mixed race people. The most beautiful environment I've ever been in, the most accepting, like, people had curves like me, people had curly hair like me, you know, like, so just, you know, don't give up that you have to fit into a box that society says you have to fit in, because those boxes should be circles, and
they weren't built for you.
They weren't built for you, yeah. And then for people who are, you know, trying to learn and are, you know, still learning, remembering that learning is a lifelong process and that we have to unlearn in order to learn. So, like, I have another one of these shirts from Alfred's Laundry that says "Unlearn that shit," because that's what we gotta start with, you know?
I need that one.
Yeah, like, constantly challenging. Like, you know, if you pass somebody on the street, like, let's say you see a Black man and he's wearing a gold chain and, like, gold jewelry and stuff, and, like, if you instantly think, like, oh, that's a basketball player or something, like, that's not even, like, that's not, like, a dangerous stereotype, but it's a stereotype of, like, why do I think that a Black man wearing nice jewelry must be a basketball
associated
player?
To this,
yeah,
right.
So, like, constantly in the moment challenging those implicit biases that we all have built into us in this white supremacist society, and knowing that, like, if you fuck up, you can do better and move on and learn from it. Know that you're gonna make mistakes. You're never gonna be a perfect ally, but as long as you listen to the people that you claim to be an ally to, and take that feedback and move forward better, that's all you can do.
Ooh.
Yeah.
You've dropped so many gems on this episode. Like, you're coming back because I already have so many different things I want to ask you about, because, like, I'm learning so much. You're motivating me to be in those spaces, because I shared with you, I haven't always felt comfortable being in those spaces because I felt I was too white for the Black kids, I was too Black for the white kids, and because I was raised in predominantly white areas, I just stuck with what I knew, and I felt uncomfortable to step out of it, and that makes me sad, because I like aspire to have a group of wonderful, beautiful Black women that are killing it in the game and doing all these things, but I'm scared to sometimes put myself in those spaces.
I've been really lucky. My aunt Mecca, that I connected with Ancestry and started the nonprofit with, she's been very just, like, formative in my identity, crucial in the formation of my identity, like, pushing me to be in spaces that I felt like I maybe shouldn't be in, or, you know, like, reassuring me that, like, your identity was taken from you, and, like, it's, you know, you're on a journey now to kind of rediscover it. Like, she was the one who connected me with that group last weekend, the writers retreat.
Yeah.
Her friend got me the job at PBS I currently have.
Wow.
Another Black woman, like, just so much, just, like, fruitful community growing from that connection.
I can see it.
Yeah, I'm blessed. I feel so blessed for that.
Mecca.
Mm-hmm.
What a cool name, too.
Very cool.
Yeah, I definitely, like I said this last time I spoke to you, but I do want to get more involved, and I do want to be in, like, build a community being back home now. Like, my dad is Liberian, and I love my family, but it's different than Black America. Yeah. So I've always even felt, like, unsure of that even, and I wish I've had, like, a closer connection with my aunts on that side. Like, they've never taught me how to do my hair. Not that it's on them to, but, like, they would have been a great resource, because my mom didn't know, and, like, I had to learn from a young age. I still am figuring it out, but, like, things like that would have been so nice to have somebody just in my corner. But yeah, building that community, that's on my agenda, that's on my goal, on my vision board for this year. So
I think that like, that retreat last weekend, there was a lot more women than men, and I actually learned in this really small group. I shared, like, I was nervous before the weekend to come into this space as, you know, a multiracial, light-skinned woman, and this Black man, very Black, in the group was like, and I was nervous coming in as a man, because I thought this was supposed to be for Black women, you know, so, like, knowing that we all come at situations like that probably.
Yeah.
And just like having, like being humble enough to be like, yeah, I don't know where I fit in here, but like y'all are going to show me kind of where my place is, and you also accept me knowing that, you know, we come from different,
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Gonna look into that.
Yeah.
I'm really gonna do it. Keep me accountable, y'all. My last question for you is, because you do so much great work, you've already spoke to it, but I just want to make sure I give a time for you to, like, say what you're working on so we can elevate it and everyone listening can go and support it. So what are you doing right now, and where can we find it?
So on Instagram, Sabrina Fluegel. I should spell it maybe, Sabrinafluegel. Growing kind of quickly with the views on my Instagram reels.
They're popping.
That's a little scary, but I've been making videos kind of about my family's journey and about like issues of race and society through media. So if you're interested in that and like kind of some stories about like undertold Black history, you can follow my Instagram, also BIPOC Foodways Alliance. I do all the social media for that. And then, those are the two main ones I would say follow for like social justice and racial equity content. And other than that, really like the big thing is like supporting people on social media. It helps a lot. And my content is all about that, like self-discovery and how to like be a better ally in BIPOC spaces.
And it's really good, y'all. Like, it's entertaining, and it's, like, quick to the point. Like, I don't lose interest watching it. Like, sometimes some people are going to get to the point. But, yours is, like, really engaging and entertaining. It's really good. I'm not just saying that.
Sometimes I'm joking, too. Like, I use humor as a, like, coping mechanism a lot. So, like, just know some of it comes from, like, I'm being a smartass.
Yeah, because I be laughing. I need to laugh, because this shit is deep, okay? But, no, definitely follow her. It's so good. You will love it. I was just on there while I was doing some research for the episode to recap, and I learned a lot from it, so yay.
Well, thank
you for being on.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You killed it, dude, for real.